Reptar.
What's up guys, Rob from Ledgetraps Game here, bringing you another character guide. And in this guide we are going over the serial mascot dinosaur himself, Reptar. So I've been playing Reptar since the game dropped. He was a day one character for me, and he's stayed in my rotation ever since, usually as my third pick or a pocket pick. Character that initially I started playing just for fun because I thought he looked like a ton of fun during his character reveal, and it turned out to be correct. I just absolutely love playing this character, and he's so much fun to play. So, you know, the game's heavy. He has some very interesting things he can do with some of his moves that are actually a lot more technical than you would think a heavy character has going for him. You know, he's not just pure power. Like, don't get me wrong, he hits like an absolute freight train. But Reptar has some sauce, and he has some more technical sides to him that you might be surprised. So yeah, I'm very excited to bring you this guide. Like I said, been playing Reptar since the game came out, so, you know, obviously I'm not the best Reptar. He's not my main, obviously, but I've been playing him for quite a while, so I think I know enough to put out a guide for you guys. And of course, I've been consulting the other Reptar mains in the Grinders Court and around the internet, just to make sure that I'm doing him his due diligence, because I love this serial loving dinosaur. He's so much fun. So let's get into it. In the first part, we're going to start with his basic stats and his moveset. So on screen you're seeing Reptar's base character stats, and again, like with Garfield, these are ranked out of 25. We currently have 23 characters, but again, Lucy's 3 modes have different stats, so these are rankings out of 25. So Reptar is the heaviest character in the game at 138, so he is the heavy of the game for sure. This weight allows him to live for quite a long time, as well as some of his other ways he can get out of disadvantage allow him to live for a pretty long time. So you're going to rack up some pretty high percents with this character just based on the fact that he just weighs so much. His run speed 16, he is 25th, and his air speed 14, again 25th. So yeah, he is slow. No surprise there at all. To get around and to space out some of your moves, definitely going to want to be utilizing your wave dashes as much as possible, specifically if you're trying to just flat out get from one side of the stage to the other. It's going to be way faster for you to wave dash over there than to try to run with Reptar. Same thing with the air speed. You know, you're just going to have to get used to being a little bit slower in the air, not having as much maneuverability as some other characters you might see. So yeah, I mean, of course, like I said, the weight is good. It helps him live for a while, but it of course has its drawbacks in your speed. His fall speed sorted fastest to slowest, 33, tied for 7th. This is actually pretty slow. A lot of characters have tied fall speeds and gravities just because of the way the game was produced. So he actually falls pretty fast. Sorry, not slow. He actually falls pretty fast. Again, you know, just with his weight, it's just, you're gonna fall like a brick with Reptar. Not the heaviest faller, but you are gonna fall into a lot of combos based on your size and your fall speed, and same with the gravity. You know, you're just gonna be falling into a lot of, specifically up air chains are pretty difficult to escape with Reptar. Up air and air chains are pretty difficult sometimes, just because you're gonna be falling into them before you're gonna be able to act out of them a lot of the time, until you get up to those higher percents and a knockback starts to send you up. So yeah, just keep in mind, you know, Reptar, he's a thick boy, he's heavy, so you're going to live for quite some time, but you're going to have to get used to being slow and definitely utilizing your wave dashes in order to space your stuff out, you know, and in the air, you're going to have to get used to being slower in the air, which means, you know, you're going to rely on some reads. Reptar can be a pretty read heavy character sometimes. But we'll get more into specifics of what these things imply and do to his character later. We're talking about movesets and combos. But yeah, so just some base stats for Reptar. So let's get into his moveset. So in this section, we're going to be going over Reptar's moveset. So one thing to keep in mind about Reptar's moveset is that when you compare it to lighter characters in the cast, his moves tend to be pretty slow. For example, on his light attacks, the fastest light attacks he has are frame 9. And the slower ones are frame 10. So his light up or his up tilt, his light down or his down tilt, his light dash attack, and his light up air are all frame 9. Light neutral or his jab, his light nair, and his light down air are all frame 10. Now they do hit pretty hard. The one with the least amount of damage, light neutral and light down, both do 10%. So of course you get a little bit of a trade-off, you know, a little bit of a slower moveset on a heavier character is going to do a little bit more damage. So let's start with his light neutral or his jab, which is headbutt. Now this move has a pretty decent hitbox. It's combos into or is used in tandem with his light dash attack, and it's actually really good when you combo it with his light dash attack to ground opponents and set up for jab resets, which are going to set up into tech chases with his down special, which we'll get into when we go into his combos and bread and butter percent builder section. But overall, this move is, I would say it's a decent jab, especially when you consider the fact that it is a kill option. It does have enough power to kill, and it does have a pretty good hitbox. It's only 2 active frames, unfortunately, and it has a bit of end lag, of course, but when you see it in combination with the rest of his kit, you'll see that it's a pretty good jab, and it does set nicely into things for tech chasing with his down special, like I said, we'll get into later. And of course, if you have your opponent at a high enough percent, you can actually get a kill on him. So we'll set Reptar up here to, like, you have to set, you know, our opponent to some pretty high percents, considering that he's also pretty heavy. But it does set up into some nice kill options as well. So yeah, his jab is nothing special, but it is really useful when you combine it with other aspects of his kit to get some nice down B tech chases. Reptar's light down or his down tilt is actually the move that I tend to use out of shield the most. It's one of his frame 9 moves, and it doesn't have a ton of end lag, you know, compared to some of his other moves. So I find that this move is a pretty good out of shield option. It's a pretty good get off me move as well, with a decent hitbox to go along with it. So if you take a look at the hitbox here, you can see that it covers his entire body. So it's not disjointed, but you're not, you know, unless your opponent is behind you when they hit your tail, they're really not going to be able to punish it that hard unless you miss, of course. But if you don't miss, then, you know, this hitbox covering everything is pretty difficult to get a hold of. But like I said, it is a decent out of shield option. It is the option for out of shield that I use the most. You know, so if your opponent's up in your face, you know, you can throw out a good down tilt out of shield, and it does knock them away a decent amount too. So it's a good get off me move. If they're kind of pressuring your shield, you're able to yellow shield something and get a down tilt out. It's a good way to reset neutral if you're finding yourself a little bit pressured or kind of put in a corner. Reptar's light up is kind of a snout strike here. You can see he has a little bit of a neck flail going on. This move is, again, decent. It's useful for certain juggles, and it's got a pretty decent hitbox on it as well. You see it covers pretty much his entire body except for, like, maybe that lower part of his right foot. But it does set up for some nice juggles. It's a decent option as an anti-air, although the hitbox isn't really disjointed all that much, so you're going to be kind of running it kind of tight, using it as an anti-air, considering it doesn't last for that many frames. But it does set up for some nice juggles, especially on heavier opponents. You can just juggle them away all day, especially if they're not gonna air dash away. You can usually get a couple of these off. As you can see, you know, these are landing pretty effectively until he gets up to the higher percent where he's starting to get away a little bit. So again, decent move, nothing too crazy, but does set up for some nice juggles. Reptar's light dash attack is actually one of his best moves, in my opinion. The hitbox on it is pretty good, covers his entire body, and it lasts a decent amount of time when you compare it to the rest of his lights. A lot of the rest of his lights really only last 2 frames. This one lasts for 7 frames. It's a frame 9 move when it comes out. So I'll show you the hitbox here for the light dash. And his light dash also sets up into a lot of other things. that we'll talk about later for his percent builders. But as you can see, the hitbox covers his entire body, except here it's kind of weird. You can get hit out of this technically, but generally speaking, you're not really going to. Your opponent's gonna have to time it pretty hard to hit you out of this. And the other thing that's nice about it is you get a little bit of a speed boost, so you're kind of lumbering towards him as this big dinosaur, and then you kind of jump forward a little bit when you activate the move. So this move is going to be useful for a lot of his bread and butter percent builders, and overall it's one of his better moves. Obviously you kind of want to set this up in your neutral game because it's super punishable on shield. So don't just throw it out randomly because it does have a little bit of end lag and it is punishable on shield. But overall, I really like his light dash attack, and I think it's one of his best moves. Reptar's Light Nair is another pretty solid move. It comes out frame 10, so it's on the slower end of his lights and only lasts 2 frames, but it's decently ranged, and you can actually use this to continue combo strings, get a little bit of damage, and it covers his entire hurt box, so it's not really going to be punishable that much in terms of like your opponent's not going to be able to just reach around a hitbox and get you out of this move. And it covers a pretty decent amount of space, so you can use it as a spacing tool in neutral to kind of poke at your opponent, throw out some light nairs in neutral, kind of find a way in. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing that'll like blow your mind, but I do like this move, and like I said, it's decent shield pressure too, because it's not disjointed, but it's far away enough from his hurt box that's going to be a little bit difficult to punish. Now it is -6, so don't go throwing this out when you're super close to their shield, but if you can space it, it can be pretty difficult to punish, because if you look in the animation, by the time the hitboxes go away, he's already kind of retracting back towards his own body, where he'll be able to throw out another move. So decent move, nothing crazy, but definitely something you will be able to make use of. Reptar's Light Up Air is Air Kick. So this is a frame 9 move that lasts from frames 9 to 11, so 3 frames on this move, which is nice. And this is a good juggling tool because it comes packing a pretty decent hitbox. As you can see here, it covers his entire body, and by the time you get up here, you notice that he doesn't have a hurt box on his foot, so your opponent's going to be pretty hard pressed to try to get out of this disadvantaged state by hitting you out of it, because it covers everything. His hurt box doesn't start until he gets to his ankle. So this is a really good juggling tool. You can set this up out of some light up tilts on the ground. Get your opponent, pop your opponent up in the air, and I'm not the best at it because it being only 3 frames, I'm not, I'm privileged to play a lot of characters that have more frames on their up airs, but you can see it actually packs a decent punch too. So if you're finding yourself against a character who is lighter, you could actually get a kill off of it, So yeah, good for juggles. Obviously, if you're better than me, you can juggle them longer, but you do your fast fall light up airs, get your juggles out, and build a percent. Reptar's Light Down Air is actually one of my favorite moves. It's nothing crazy when it comes to frame data. It only lasts 3 frames, frames 10 to 12, so frame 10 move, but I actually really like this move. I think it's a lot more useful than people give it credit for, especially as a anti-air. It sounds kind of weird saying using a dare as an anti-air, but when you look at the hitbox on this move, it covers a lot of aerial space. I mean, by the time you're getting to your last frame, again, it's like his light up air. It's covering pretty much, well, entirety of his hurt boxes on his lower part of his body, and it can push your opponent into the ground. And as you'll see later for our percent builders, you want your opponent as grounded as possible. You want your opponent to be on the ground as often as you can get them, and so setting up for his light dare gets your opponent grounded. Like I said, it's a pretty good neutral tool. It's not good on shield, definitely punishable because you're going to be hard pressed to try to get out of the way of the punish on shield. It is -6, but it's definitely a good tool, and if your opponent is missing techs, you can just bounce them off the ground over and over again. It's pretty funny when your opponent wants to miss techs and you can play Reptar basketball. And of course, it also sets up into some spikes. off stage, sets up into some spikes. So if you get a grab out or you get your opponent off stage, you can set them up to get hit off stage with a spike. You can double dare with Reptar. It's just a little bit committal, and it's a little bit scary because his up special doesn't cover the most ground. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to be trying to double dare with him, you're going to have to commit super hard and you might die off of it. But his dare hits hard enough that most of the time, if your opponent's at like decent enough percent, they're probably just going to die off of it anyway. So yeah, I really like this move. I think it's one of the best moves in his entire kit. Alright, so now we're going to move on to Reptar's strong attacks. And, true to his nature as a dinosaur, but also his nature as a heavy in this game, he hits like an absolute Mack truck with some of these moves. So we'll start with his strong neutral on the ground, his tail swipe. This move is decent. It's nothing crazy, but if you can trap your opponent towards the edge of the stage with this move, and they're at high percent, you're going to send them to the Shadow Realm. Hitbox on it is decent, nothing crazy, but it does cover all of his hurt boxes. So your opponent's not really going to be able to punish you super hard for it, of course, unless you hit this on shield, at which point it is a sick -15. But the hitbox on it's pretty good, even extending all the way back to his chest, oddly enough. So even if you kind of miss space a little bit, even if you're like all up in your opponent's grill, you're still going to get the hit off with it. So, one of his kill moves at ledge for sure, if you can catch your opponent out with it. But he typically doesn't have a ton of setups into this one, as much as the aerial version of this, which we'll get into. But all the same, if you get a teeter at the edge, or your opponent's just at high enough percent and you can catch them out, like if they're doing a lot of dumb things like dash attacking into you and you just catch them out with a strong tail whip, yeah, you're going to send them absolutely flying. Reptar's strong down is a tail slam, and this has some pretty solid uses as ledge play and edge guard tool because it spikes super hard. And the hitboxes cover pretty much all of the ledge if you space it properly. And it definitely hits really hard. Like I'll show you here. If you space it out properly, and your opponent's missing the ledge snap, you can cover a lot. You can see it even covers off the ledge even further. So your opponent's going to have a difficult time trying to get back onto stage that way. So if Reptar wants to be nice for us, stay on ledge, please. If your opponent's holding ledge, or you can simulate, he missed his ledge snap, just boom, get out of here. So really useful edge guard / ledge play tool. On stage, not super duper useful. You can use it to call out dash attacks every now and then if you want to RPS them, but definitely gets the most use, in my opinion, as an offstage spike. His up strong is back tail swipe, and I actually really like this move for a variety of reasons, one of which, yes, it hits pretty hard. The hitbox on it's kind of weird. It doesn't encompass all of his body all at once like you might think it would, but it does cover enough to the point where your opponent, is gonna get hit by it if they're coming above you. This is a pretty good move as an anti-air, surprisingly enough. If your opponent's landing on you a lot with nairs and stuff like that, it's gonna take a little bit of use to getting the timing of it down, of course, because it is a strong attack, so you're gonna have to start it before they really start to approach you. But if you can catch, a light character like an Oblina who's coming at you with a lot of nairs, and you call her out with an up strong, boy, you are going to absolutely destroy lighter characters. I also find this move is pretty easy to RPS with. So if you're facing off against somebody who likes to land with a lot of S-stairs, so somebody like an April O'Neil or a Powder Toast Man, I don't know if it's a placebo effect kind of thing, if it's just me, but it does seem like this move RPS is kind of easier than some other moves might. And the other thing that's nice to know about this, I'll cut to a little compilation shot here for you guys. This thing can shark under most of the platforms on the stage, which is really useful if your opponent's shielding on a platform above you. You might just be able to force them into a teeter situation using an upstrong. A lot of people, for some reason, just get caught out by this move. Maybe because Reptar is not like super duper tall, but yeah, you can actually call people out on platforms with this move a lot of the time and shark under a lot of platforms. So overall, I like this move a lot. It's a move that I tend to get pretty good mileage out of, but another one of these moves where, again, just because of startup, just grind out the timing on calling people out with it. Reptar's strong dash attack is an interesting move. It can set up into typical dash attack combo stuff, like you can do a strong dash into a strong neutral if they don't DI it properly and whatnot. It's very interesting because it can feel difficult to land at times. If Reptar wants to do the move, so I can show you the hitbox here. As you can see, he kind of does the lunge forward, but the hitbox is pretty low, so it's weirdly easy to low profile or jump over this move. Not low profile. It's easy for your opponent to kind of just straight up jump over this move at times. Even just like a short hop jumping over it, sometimes will just get them out of the way. So it can be difficult to land. It's used in conjunction with the light dash in sort of a wave slime situation, which we'll go over later. And you can also do some funky things like getting grabs off of it, because it does kind of pop your opponent into a spot in order to be grabbed at lower percents. At higher percents, they tend to get sent too far away for this to really work. But if I can show you the kind of where the hitbox just comes out, it sets them up like pretty well for a grab most of the time off of it. So definitely has its uses, specifically in conjunction, like I said, with light dash for wave slime, which we'll go over later. And you can get some funky grabs off of it every now and then. But do keep in mind that it's a bit slow and the hitbox can be just straight up jumped over sometimes. So a little bit of a funky move for sure. Reptar's strong neutral air, or his snare, is one of his best moves in my opinion. I actually love using this move to get kills. It's, out of all the kind of tail swipey moves that he does, his light and air, his grounded neutral strong, and his aerial neutral strong, I think that this one is the best one. His light and air is pretty good too, obviously, but this one is definitely the one I get the most use out of. So I'll show you the hitboxes here. Although it's not anything you haven't seen. Whoops, that's a strong down air. It's not anything you haven't seen before with his other tail moves. Comes out, covers the entirety of his hurt boxes, and extends out pretty far. So again, it's a pretty good ranging tool, which makes it, interestingly, not the worst move to hit on shield. It's only -5 on block. Especially when you combine it with the the range that this move comes out for. It's a decent move to hit on shield. Obviously you don't want to be hitting it on shield if you can avoid it, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But as a kill option, this move is fantastic. You can fast fall it to cover more ground, much like if you watch the Garfield guide with his fast fall snare. It's just extending that hitbox is really helpful. And the other thing you can do with it, which is one of my favorite things to do, is you can kind of wiggle your stick back and forth in the air. You see how off a short hop, he's kind of flicking back and forth. Don't know where your opponent's going to be like, what is he doing? And then you wiggle your stick back and forth, and then you throw out a snare in a direction. It can really mess with people. Surprisingly, it's a very simple mind game that works a lot better than you would think. So we'll cover, again, like I said, more in depth when you get to kill options, but yeah, his snare is one of his best moves, and I absolutely love this move. Reptar's strong up air is one of his more interesting moves. This thing absolutely hits like a truck, but it can be kind of difficult to land sometimes due to a little bit of a smaller hitbox, as well as not really having a ton of like true confirms into it. And its startup is pretty long too. Like the hitbox isn't terrible, especially this last final hitbox on the last frame gets pretty big. But it's not the biggest thing in the world, and it does take a little bit to come out. So while it is a good move to finish off, you know, if you're having like a juggle situation where you've managed to juggle your opponent up to a high enough percent, it can cover strong dare landings as well. But I will just warn you like ahead of time, it can be kind of difficult to land given a smaller hitbox, a little bit of a high startup. You know, 24 frame startup is a little difficult to manage sometimes. But if you do land it, you know, let's see if I can get Reptar to cooperate with me there. It definitely will blast your opponent up. Like even a grounded Reptar at 140, he's gone. You know, obviously the AI is not DIing, but yeah, hits like a truck can be a little bit difficult to land. But, you know, the more you grind out Reptar's timing, the better you'll be with using it. Reptar's strong down air is very interesting. He basically turns himself into the hitbox. The hitbox, as you can see, is kind of weird in a sense that there are some parts of his hurtbox that are sticking out, but it matches up well enough with his animation that it's not really the end of the world. But also, as you can see, it lasts the entire time the move is out. So you can jump out of it if you land on a hit. If you have a jump left, so you do single jump, hit it, and then do a jump out of it. If you still have your air dash, you know, your other resources, you can jump out of it on hit, which is nice. Jump cancelable on hit. Sets up for some interesting sort of situations that you can do with it. But if you use it off stage and you don't hit anything, it's an SD. I'll spam jump and air dash just to show you I'm not kidding around here. So I'll just walk off. Yeah, it's an SD if you use it off stage and you don't hit an opponent. It does have some interestingly niche uses as a kind of a silly edge guard. Like that, you know, if your opponent's trying to recover to ledge and you can call out a jump or their up special, but if you miss, USD. If they grab ledge before you do, or if they grab ledge before you hit them, you just SD off. So niche uses as kind of a really funny edge guard because it does cover the ledge. You know, if you use it off stage, it does cover the ledge decently well, but yeah, if you miss or your opponent grabs ledge, goodbye Reptar. So definitely a funny move. This actually also can sometimes kill kind of early on stages with high platforms, so something like an Urkin Armada invasion on the highest platform, or some of Tremorton Joyride's weird kind of situation they have going on there. But yeah, overall this move definitely a niche move for sure. Don't want to be using it and abusing it too much. You want to kind of keep this as a surprise option for your opponent, because otherwise you're going to be SDing off stage a lot with this move. Alright, now we're going to get into Reptar's specials. And I think that this is where Reptar starts to excel. I think he has some of the better specials in the game. His neutral special and his down special, you're able to charge and kind of change up the properties on those a little bit. And low-key, his up special, you actually can also change the distance on with a little technique I'll show you later that some people actually don't know about, but you will see. But I mean, his infamous down B, his broken down B combo, if you know, you know, and you will know by the end of this guide. Yeah, Reptar specials are some of the better specials in the game, in my opinion. So let's get into it. So his neutral special is his Fireball. Does 9%. It's a slow moving projectile. To be honest, it's not the best projectile in the world. It's 24 frames to charge it up, or not charge up, to just release it normally. and it's slow moving enough that your opponent can kind of easily grab it or reflect it. It's okay, but it's not the greatest when you just straight up using it as a projectile. Now I want to show you something. You can charge up his neutral special and release a volcanic beam. So if you hold the B all the way through, you will unleash this crazy beam of a hitbox that just comes out. You know, the charging it you're able to see ahead of time, but when it actually gets released, it's you know, 1 frame where this thing just comes out, and as you can see, it covers a lot. You know, the hitbox on it is pretty good. The armor, you actually have armor on this thing, so the armor starts on frame 35 and ends on frame 45 while charging. So as you can see here, if we continue to charge it, eventually Reptar is going to flash blue. Though, you know, at that point he has the armor, and so you can't hit him out of this. You know, if you're trying to hit Reptar while he's charging this thing, while he has his armor going, you will not succeed. I messed up the timing on that one, obviously, but the armor on this one's not as important as much as the impact that it has. This can also be used if your opponent's hanging ledge without invincibility. You can use this to just simply go get off my ledge, knock him off ledge. It's a great mix-up tool in order to keep your opponent honest. You know, if during the fight you're spitting out a couple of fireballs every now and then, you know, maybe you hold down for a little bit and then let go, kind of put the fear in them that eventually you're gonna charge this thing all the way up. You know, you can charge it in the air as well, do something like that, and that's actually one of the best uses for it in my opinion, because you can also kind of drift with it. So you're charging up in the air, you're holding back, you know, you can drift back, still facing your opponent, drift back and hit him with the neutral special. So yeah, one of the more fun neutral specials in the game when you charge it all the way up, but it can be punishable, you know, if your opponent's able to jump over it and get around you and all that. So don't be throwing it out all the time, but definitely an honesty check, I'll say. It's a keep your opponent honest move. So now is the time for Reptar's infamous down B, broken down B combo. Yes, the broken down B combo. Let us go over it. His down special is his Flame Breath, and this can be released immediately or charged, and obviously the longer you charge it, the bigger the hitbox gets. And yes, this does deal 30% every time. So this is the move that when the game was coming out, everyone was talking about, oh my god, 30% in one down special. Yeah, this is it. So this move, Grounded, is a pretty good honesty check. You know, if your opponent's approaching you with some annoying options like a Shredder neutral B, you just throw one of these out and keep them honest, because it will hit them out of it. If they're misspacing aerials, it'll hit them out of it. And you might notice that this does have armor. So this starts, the armor starts on frame 8 and continues all the way until you release the attack. So you'll see the purple Reptar here is going to use his down special. Reptar gets off a jab, but you know, I take the damage. I'll turn damage reset off. You know, I take the damage, but he still gets hit. So this does have armor when you're charging it. This can be really useful for things like tech chasing. We'll see if Reptar wants to be nice to me here. You know, if you notice that your opponent is teching a certain direction, you can always just try to tech chase them with this. It's a really good move for that, which we'll get into later. This is also a decent move to cover ledge with. You can see that the Fire Breath does extend off ledge. So if your opponent is missing their ledge snap over and over again, you just hold this at ledge. Again, we'll get more in depth with that later, but very good move. Now, this move is different in the air. If you charge in the air, it is a bite, a flame bite. What do they call it? I guess they just still call it Flame Breath, but I'll show you here if Reptar wants to do a double jump for us. Whoops. Frame by frame here. hold down B. This also has armor. So this is actually a good move to get out of disadvantage with. You can armor through a lot of things using this move. And it gets you out of some pretty sticky situations. And the hitbox on it is decent. Nothing crazy. But it also does hit pretty hard. You know, and yes, it does deal 30%. When completely charged. It does 10, 20, or 30 depending on how long you charge it. So another really good move for Reptar. Again, another one of these moves you can drift back, you know, change up your spacing on it, armor through some disadvantaged states and all that. So down special is a move whether you're on the ground and you're trying to tech chase or up in the air trying to get out of disadvantage. It is a move that you will be getting use out of a lot. So Reptar's up special is nothing crazy. It's not the best recovery in the world. I'm just going to be kind of honest about it. You can somewhat change the position he goes in. So you see I'm holding left or right here, depending on where I want to go. And it does have a hitbox on the way up as well as on the way down. So if I use his up special here, see at one point, yep, still now his hitbox on the way up. Doesn't have a hitbox here, and then on the way down has hitbox. So kind of weird with the hitboxes. Unfortunately, this means certain characters can gimp your recovery kind of easily, especially if they have a really good anti-air move. It does allow you to recover for some decently low distances, but you know, if you go the wrong way, obviously you're just gonna SD. And snapping ledge with this move is super important. I'll explain this again later when we go into Reptar's disadvantage states, but practice. You're gonna need to practice with this move in order to snap ledge, just because it's kind of funky with how how high you go. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can somewhat change the height that this goes. Now, this is difficult, so I might have to cut here to when I get this. But if you jump and then input an up B very soon after you jump, I'm not sure frame-wise how tight it is. But you can see this is normal up B height. I'll just show you here. And then I'm going to maybe have to cut here to see if I can get his, there we go, right that. You saw those two ones that went lower. The community name for this, I believe, is still the Shorty Slam. And it's kind of funny because you can almost use this to, like, you know, surprise people sometimes. In some very, very, very niche situations. Like, you're not going to want to be shorty slamming to recover off stage. I'll say that much, but it can be difficult to pull off. You can't just press X or your jump and your up B at the same time. It's a very, very tight window. As you can see, I'm just trying to get it here, and it's difficult. But yes, a jump followed by an up B input very soon after. Again, not super positive on the frame window for that. You will do what is known as the shorty slam. It can be a way to just kind of, I don't know, you know, if you're playing around and your opponent's kind of not respecting you or being on the other side of stage, or, you know, you can go for like an edge guard with it, I guess. Yeah, it's very, very interesting, very niche uses, but you know, it is worth knowing that you can do it if you want. But yeah, otherwise, when it comes to his recovery, his up special, it's not great. It's not the worst in the world, though, because you are rocking a hitbox and you can somewhat control the direction. But yeah, like I said, definitely gonna have to practice snapping ledge on different stages, because it is going to be important that you're able to do that with Reptar. Okay, so in this part of the video, we're going to be talking about neutral. And I think that Reptar's neutral is kind of a weakness of his. He has some ways that you can win neutral that are super effective, but the issue is they become a little bit predictable. And sometimes the ways that you're going to be trying to win neutral are going to rely on some hard reads or callouts. So overall, his neutral's not the best, but there are things you can do to make it work. So we're going to discuss those in this part of the video. So one of the things you can do to try to throw your opponents off in neutral is use his neutral B, his fireball. Now the problem is this is not the fastest projectile on the market. Certainly not the best projectile in the game. It's very easy to grab because it's so slow. It's very easy to reflect because it's so slow. It's easy to dodge because it's so slow. It's not really the best projectile game going for it, but it can be something you throw out, if you want to throw out a neutral B high and then, dash towards your opponent to try to, force them to stay low and then cover low. You can do that if you want to just throw out the neutral B towards them and force them to either, shield it and potentially take a hit. If we set SpongeBob to shield here, he can shield it, run up and get a grab or something like that. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world with the neutral B, just because it's got a lot of end lag for projectile, and it'd be kind of difficult to get a neutral win off of that. One of the other things in neutral that I like to do a lot is actually probably the thing I do the most outside of his down special is his dare. And one of the reasons that I think this is so good is because a lot of the times, a lot of characters in this game, when you're dealing with a character like SpongeBob or a character like Oblina, a character like April O'Neil, characters that want to approach you in the air, as we discussed in the moveset part of the video, this is a pretty good anti-air, surprisingly, because, let's go frame by frame here, and, we suppose that SpongeBob is approaching us. Oh wait, that's strong. The AI controls. SpongeBob is approaching us by jumping at us. We can approach him and throw out our dare here and kind of cover that space. Obviously that didn't connect, but you see how we threw a hitbox out to kind of where he wanted to go. You have to excuse me, but I'm doing this one person here, but let's say SpongeBob is jumping and he's kind of coming at us a little bit, and we can jump up. Usually SpongeBob's are going to be jumping at you with some kind of nair. Usually, we hit him with the down air, we get him grounded, and now we can follow up on that. If he misses the tech, we'd run up, do a down B, something like that. So characters that like to approach you in the air definitely want to make use of your dare, just because it covers a lot of aerial space that they want to approach in, and it's kind of difficult. You can be punished, obviously, as you can see. If you get around that first hitbox and you're going to hit Reptar in the head, you can punish this move, but it is a little bit more difficult to do than it is to say. And the dare really does set up for other things. Specifically, the reason that this can set up for a neutral win is because if your opponent is missing the tech, they jump, you hit them with a dare, and they're grounded. This is where you want your opponent to be. This is where Reptar is going to do the most work, is on grounded opponents. Opponents that are in the air, we talked about his up airs and his nairs and other things kind of being not as easy to kind of string together. So we want to try to keep the fight on the ground as much as possible, in my opinion, with Reptar. And being able to just stomp your opponent down and ground them, get them out of your face, stop them from using their nairs and stuff like that, it's going to be a big bonus to us. So don't be afraid to keep these nairs going, at least threatening them. Keep your opponent honest if they want to try to approach you over and over again in the air. Throw out these nairs, or these dares, sorry. You can also use nair to a similar kind of situation. If they're approaching you in the air, you can throw out your nair. You can do a fast fall nair, kind of keep them honest. Nair does a similar thing to down air, where it's going to throw out a hitbox in the space that they're going to want to approach with. So it's even maybe a little bit better animation-wise than dare, because it leaves a little bit less of Reptar vulnerable. So this is also a good spacing tool. if your opponent is going to be shielding a lot in neutral, if you're able to hit them with this and you space it, it can be a little bit difficult for them to punish, because when you take a look at the hitboxes on this thing, obviously you don't want to be just throwing this out in neutral without a plan really, but it can be a little bit difficult for them to punish this, because by the time they're getting out of shield stun, your tail is kind of whipping back to the other side of you, and you're starting to be safe by that point from any shield pushback. So SpongeBob gets hit. By the time he's out of shield stun, our hurt box is kind of returning to normal, and especially if we're landing, we're going to be actionable and being able to do a jab or a down tilt or something like that. So definitely got to be careful with it though, because it's not plus on shield, not even close, and it's definitely something that can be punished if your opponent knows what they're doing. But if your opponents are approaching you in the air a lot, definitely want to make use of your nairs and your down airs specifically. That way you can try to hit them out of their approaches and get them down back to the stage. And I think Reptar's best neutral tool is down B. Now, this is going to be good for both characters who like to approach on the ground. So a character like a Patrick, for example, who's going to be trying to fish for that strong dash attack approach on the ground. A character like if you're playing a Garfield who's particularly trying to set up into the bobble more so than approaching with dare. This is also another good setup for them. April O'Neil's who are trying to set up for their wave slime. This is another good move for them, because again, you're covering a lot of space that's pretty far away from your own hurt box by the time they're rushing at you with their dash attack, whatever. You see SpongeBob tried to hit us with his strong dash attack on the way in and took 30%. So yeah, if you're dealing with characters who want to approach you on the ground, this is really good. But it's also really good if you're able to kind of mix up your spacing on characters who want to approach from the air. Even if SpongeBob is approaching us with nairs and we notice that he's landing his nairs pretty well on our shield or on us, and even when we're on the ground he's able to space it out properly, you can always do something like a slight dash back down B, or dash back down B. If he's approaching you and he's able to hit a lot of these, dash back down B. As he's landing with his nairs, he's going to be hitting these down Bs, and he's going to be getting into a tech chase situation, which is exactly where we want our opponents as Reptar. So those are just some tips. You can also try to mix in a little bit of Patrick gameplay, as I like to call it. You set up for your dash dance, and try to trick up your opponent's timing, wait for them to make a mistake, and then you set up into your dash attack, and then you get off a little wave slime combo or something like that. Dash attack in neutral is not the worst thing, but it is turbo punishable on shield. If we get SpongeBob back on stage here and he wants to set up into a shield, like, look how much you're just basically a sitting duck if you hit this on somebody's shield. He's not even yellow shielding, and he's able to just eat all of it, and he's barely even getting pushed back on gray shield. So yeah, and same with strong dash. You're a sitting duck if you get shielded this. So got to be very careful with using your dash attacks in neutral. So overall, some neutral tips. You can mix in some projectiles with the fireball every now and then. Just keep in mind that they're not the best thing in the world when it comes to this neutral game. Definitely want to make use of your nair and dare. I think these are two really, really good moves to keep to kind of call out opponents who like to approach from the air specifically. You do your dare, you do a fast fall dare, fast fall nair, kind of call them out. And down B, I mean, obvious, like I said, with down B being one of his best moves, but it calls people out on the ground. It calls people out who approach from the air. It's definitely a very powerful tool. It even has the armor, so if they land on you with a nair, they're still going to eat the down B after the fact, and you're going to set them up for a situation that they don't want to be in. So a neutral win for Reptar really is if you're able to kind of get your opponent down on the ground and go from there. If you want to get them back up into the air, you can set up for some up tilts, do your, up air strings and things along that line. But I generally think that a neutral win for Reptar is when you're able to ground your opponent and set up into a tech chase situation. So you see what I mean when I say that he has some pretty powerful ways to win neutral. I mean, down B in and of itself, when you get a neutral win off of down B, it is going to put your opponent in a pretty bad space, especially if they don't know how to tech. This is going to be your primary way you're going to be dealing most of your damage. But, you know, he has some powerful ways to win neutral, but he's a little bit limited in that capacity. So definitely want to practice mixing things up as much as you can with Reptar, because your options are somewhat limited compared to other parts of the cast. Okay, so in this section of the video, we're going to be talking about grabs and how to get grabs and what to do off of grabs. And this section is going to be pretty short and simple because Reptar doesn't get as much mileage off of grabs as other characters in this game do. And he doesn't have as many setups into grabs as other characters do as well. So he does have a couple though, so we will be going over that right now. So let's start with how to get a grab. So obviously outside of just raw neutral, just running up and grabbing your opponent, there's a couple of different ways you can try to set up into grabs, but the two ones that I find work the best are actually his dash attacks. You can do a light dash into a grab, or you can do a strong dash into a grab. And pretty much what you want to do here is as soon as you're able to act out of your dash, you just want to hit that grab button, and you should be able to grab your opponent pretty easily off of these two. Now this can be DI'd, so if your opponent is DIing this properly, so if we set SpongeBob to, I believe he's set to DI away at this point. If we reset his damage, this can be DI'd, so if your opponent is DIing away, it can mess up your grab on them. Strong dash tends to work a little bit better with this because it pops your opponent up a little bit more, but still, this can be DI if your opponent wants to DI away, but strong dash typically will end up working most of the time. Light dash, if they're DIing away, is a little bit more difficult because it doesn't have as much knockback, so it's not going to send them as high in the air. So those are your two main ways to set up into a grab. You can also sometimes set up into a grab if your opponent is at high enough percent off of the down B, and they're popped up a little bit. You can also get a grab that way. But your strong dash is probably your most consistent setup into grab that Reptar has. And you want to mix in these grabs every now and then with your dash attacks just to kind of keep your opponent on their toes. So what do you do off of grabs? Well, one thing you can do, and the main thing that you'll probably be doing most of the time off of these grabs, is set up into a down throw tech chase for your down B. So, you know, you get a grab, you get your opponent down to the ground, and then you're setting up for a tech chase with your down B, you know, down throw, and then you're tech chasing with your down B. This is probably the most common thing you're going to be doing with Reptar. I even consulted some of the other Reptars, and they said that most of the time they're just going for their down throw into a tech chase. That's the #1 option that they go off of grabs. There's some other interesting things you can do with grabs, but those are not like just raw grabs or neutral grabs. Those are part of combos, so we'll get into those a little bit later as far as you know, like things you use to build percents. So those will be discussed later, but as far as like, you know, just straight up grabs in neutral off of a win, yeah, your down throw into tech chase is going to be your #1 option. I'll also put up some clips here. You can also T-drop into a strong up air or a strong nair if you can read the eye or read the way your opponent's going to be drifting. If you don't know what T-dropping is, very, very simply put, if you input a taunt in the air, your opponent, or if you have your opponent grab and you input a taunt, it lets them go and they're put into a stun. I believe right now the stun lasts about 20 frames. So Reptar doesn't have, I don't think, any true setups out of T-drop, but he does have a couple things you can do off of it, such as a strong up air or a strong nair if you can read your opponent. You know, if you want to get fancy and you want to catch your opponent out with a strong dash into a grab, into a down throw, into a catch on their jump with a strong down, you can do that off of ledge. But otherwise, on stage, just go for those tech chases and rack up that damage. In this section, we're going to be going over Reptar's bread and butter percent builders. Now, building percent with Reptar is, generally speaking, not the hardest thing in the world to do, considering that a lot of his moves do some pretty high percents. And obviously the big number one way we're going to be building percent is with his down B, which deals a massive 30% each time on hit. So generally speaking, it's not really that difficult to build percent as Reptar. However, we definitely don't want to just go in blind and start throwing out moves and not really have a game plan. We want to keep certain things in mind in order to make sure that we are building the percent to get our opponents to kill percent and being able to finish off those stocks. If we're just throwing out moves with our slow frame data and our big body, we're going to get punished. So we definitely want to keep some of these more consistent things in mind. Now, obviously, these are not all going to be 100% true. Some of these can be DI'd, some of these can be teched away from, and I will mention that when I'm talking about it. So do keep that in mind, but I do think that this list is generally pretty good at being a consistent way to build percent. So let's get started. So the number one way to build percent with Reptar the fastest is with his down special. As down special doing 30% on a hit is definitely going to rack up the damage pretty quickly. And this is his infamous down B combo. And the reason that it is a combo is because if your opponent misses their tech, they're pretty much screwed and they're going to eat another down B. And even if they do tech, if you're able to follow the way that they're teching, you'll be able to just hit them with another down special. So this is going to require a little bit of practice to get used to dashing in either direction and then getting out the down B, as well as a little bit of mind game. You know, you want to read your opponent and you want to read the way they're teching. If they're constantly teching in one direction, if they're always teching away, you know, you're going to be able to get the read on that and follow them with the down B. If they're always teching in, same thing. And tech in place doesn't really generally save you from the down B. Unless you're able to shield early and the Reptar is a little bit late on getting a down B out. So yeah, tech chasing with down B, the number one way to build percent with Reptar. And there are also a couple of different ways we can get into these situations, which I will now show you. Alright, so let's go over some of the ways that you can get your opponent into these down B chase situations. So one of the ways you can do that is with a light dash into a jab into your down B. So if your opponent is not DIing properly and misses a tech on the light dash, you're able to, generally speaking, get a jab reset on them and then throw out the down B. And then when they stand up, or even if they try to use get up attack, because you have that armor, they're not going to be able to hit you and they're going to eat the down B. So this is a really, really good way to build percent, and one of the ways that I build percent quite often. Now, do keep in mind, if your opponent DIs down and away and hits their tech, they may be able to get out of range of the jab or get out of range of the down B. So do keep in mind, if your opponent is smart enough to DI properly and they're hitting a tech away, if they're far enough away, you know, if they're not stuck into the corner, they will be able to get out of this combo. However, I find that most of the time you're able to at least get one of the strings off. So you're usually able to get at least one light dash into jab into down B off before they gain recomposure and tech away. So this is one of the better ways to get into a down B tech chase situation. Another way to get into a tech chase situation is utilizing your strong dash into a grab into a down throw. So strong dash is one of the best ways to consistently get grabs because it's going to pop your opponent upwards. Light dash sends them more close to the ground, and so if they're DIing properly and can tech away, they're going to be able to get away from your grab hitbox. However, strong dash tends to pop them up a little bit with a little bit more knockback, so you're generally able to get a grab off of that, and then you're going to immediately down throw and then get into a tech chase. If they hit the tech on the down throw, you know, you're going to be able to try to read that, or if they miss the tech on a down throw, that's a free 30% right there. So strong dash, grab, down throw is a very good way to get into a tech chase situation. So outside of down B dealing 30%, we also have some other options to build some quick percent. So up tilt can lead to itself, you know, especially if your opponent is a bigger body or heavier. You can up tilt chain if you can read the DI. If they're medium weight or lighter, generally after about 2 to 3 of these, they're going to be getting sent pretty far up in the air with a lot of knockback. So up tilt chains to themselves, you can really only get about 2 or 3 normally. However, if your opponent is either really bad at DI or they're playing a pretty heavy character, you can get a couple more off. With up tilt, you can also do up tilt into light dare, which is hilarious because you get to play Reptar dribble basketball with your opponent. So hit him with the up tilt into a light dare, keeping in mind that again, after a little bit more on the medium to high percent range, the up tilt's going to be sending him a little bit farther away, so you might not be able to follow up with the light dare. You can also do up tilts to light up air, and then you can go from there into light up air juggles. However, light up air also is going to be similar issue to your up tilt in that after higher percents, because Reptar is just kind of strong, it's going to be sending them a little bit too far to follow up on with more light up airs. But you can get a couple of these off, especially if you're better at reading DI than I am, and build up the percent that way. So another really interesting thing you can do with Reptar is something that's known as a wave slime. And this is when you combo a light dash or a strong dash into the other option. Generally speaking, we almost always start with the light dash when it comes to wave slimes. And how you do this is you hit your opponent with the light dash, you wave dash forward, because then this is going to get you into your dash state earlier, and then hit them with the other move, in this case a strong dash. And then after that, you can pretty much follow up with a lot of other moves from Reptar's kit. You can do a wave slime into a down strong, you can do a wave slime into a neutral strong, or you can do a wave slime into a down B. This is going to take a little bit of practice, but once you kind of get this down, this is a really powerful combo because it's really quick and it does a lot of percent. Of course, this can be teched away from it. If your opponent manages to hit the tech on the light dash attack, you will probably end up missing the follow-up, but if they don't, they're going to eat some pretty high percent. So again, light dash, wave dash forward, strong dash into whatever option you choose. So that's going to do it for Reptar's consistent and key bread and butter percent builders. Again, the list might not be long, but Reptar hits pretty hard, and with down B doing 30%, you really don't need all that many combos. It's also just a little bit more difficult for Reptar to combo with some of his moves, considering that they're a little bit slow and a little bit too strong. So like I said, with the up tilts, you can get about 2 or 3 before your opponent starts getting too far away from you. Same thing with the light up airs, get about 2 or 3, especially if they're playing a light character. It's going to be kind of hard to follow up on with Reptar being slow and having slower aerial speed. He doesn't necessarily have the craziest combos in the game, but the things that he has are very powerful, especially getting into those tech chase situations. If you get good enough at tech chasing, you can legitimately, deal about like 150% in like 30 seconds, maybe even less, probably even less if you're better than I am with Reptar. So just keep these in mind. Obviously with Reptar, just stray hits are going to be dealing damage. If you're hitting them with things like a down tilt out of shield or a random snare in neutral for some reason, you're going to be dealing some pretty gnarly percent. And you don't really have to deal that much percent anyway to, generally speaking, get Reptar get into Reptar's kill percent. So all of that to say, he has some fun bread and butter percent builders, but I think the real fun is going to come in this next section where we start talking about killing with Reptar. So in this section, we're going to be talking about Reptar's kill options. Now, a lot of Reptar's moves do kill. He has a lot of knockback on a lot of his moves, so I'm not going to be going over every single move of his that kills. For example, his light up air at high enough percent will kill off the top, but I'm not going to be talking about every single one because, he just has a lot of kill moves. So I'm going to be focusing on a couple of the quote-unquote stray hit moves, something that you can just throw out and, maybe get a kill off of in neutral, as well as some other of his kill confirms that are a little bit more of a combo, something you can more often reliably get into. So I'm not going to talk about every single kill option. I'm going to be focusing on the ones that either A, you're going to be getting the most use out of, or B, the ones that I find are the more consistent options out of his kit. So let's get into it with our kill options. So we talked a lot about the down special combos you can do in the bread and butter percent builder section. But once you get your opponent up to a decent enough percent, you can actually usually get either an up strong or a neutral strong off of a miss tech on the down B. When you get to that little bit of a high percent, it's going to pop your opponent up a little bit. And for the neutral strong, this generally isn't really that big of a deal because it has a little bit of range. For the up strong, you might have to wave dash in towards your opponent after they get hit with the neutral B because they might be a little bit further away. But either way, you can usually get a neutral strong or an up strong off of the miss tech from the down special. So jab is actually a pretty good kill move. It comes out decently fast compared to some of these other kill setups involving his strong attacks. And it also can be comboed into out of a light dash. If your opponent DIs it in such a way that they're not getting grounded by the light dash attack and the jab actually does knockback off of it, this can be a really powerful move at ledge when they're closer to these blast zones on the ends to get kills off of. It also can be something if your opponent's at a really high percent and you're really just trying to close out a stock. If you catch them off guard with the jab at ledge, a lot of the characters in the game are going to go flying pretty hard because jab has a fair bit of knockback. So don't be afraid to mix in your jab as your kill option because it's pretty quick and you can get some nice setups into it. So I actually get a lot of my kills with Reptar off of his snare. And I'm not talking about any particular setup into snare, just, you know, a read in neutral. For example, one of the things that I find about strong neutral air that works really well is it's really good at reading jumps. Because it has a little bit of a range and you can fast fall it to kind of cover more aerial space, hitting an opponent out of the air with snare is really going to mess up their DI a lot of the times because they're, you know, coming at you with a move and they're kind of planning ahead. And just that big hitbox kind of throwing it out into space is one of the ways that I get a lot of kills with. Now, of course, you don't want to just throw it out all the time because if your opponents are able to shield it, they can punish it. It's super punishable on shield. But just kind of keeping your opponents honest by having this move out in their airspace. And not to mention, it can kill at some pretty low percents if your opponents aren't DIing it properly. Now, one of the things that I like to do with snare, if you look at some of these clips, you notice I'm kind of wiggling my stick back and forth. And I don't know if it's just an animation thing. Maybe it's because of the way that Reptar moves in the air. It kind of looks a little bit weird. Maybe it messes with your opponent's timing. They think you're retreating backwards, going the other direction. It seems to trip a lot of people up, which is kind of weird, but kind of cool in the same way that you can kind of have this mind game where you're wiggling your stick back and forth. Reptar's kind of twisting in the air. Your opponent's not sure where you're going, especially against combo characters who want to put a lot of pressure on you and they might think you're retreating in this moment. They'll kind of overcommit and get into your kill range and get into your space. You can usually hit them with a snare at that point. Just make sure, obviously, at the time of hitting the button that you're facing the right way. But, yeah. Reptar snare, in general, is one of my favorite kill options. I get a lot of mileage off of it, so definitely want to get good at using this move. So, like most characters in the game, Reptar can combo his dash attacks into a strong. On stage, you can usually hit a light dash into a neutral strong. If your opponent's even at high enough percent, you can hit light dash into down strong on stage. You can even combo strong dashes into a neutral strong, strong dash into down strong on stage as well. Although I will say on stage, light dash attack into down strong works better. It's kind of a weird option to go for since you're spiking them off the stage up into the top blast zone. This could be used, I guess, as a DI mix-up if you really want. You know, if you're noticing your opponent's DIing your neutral strongs the right way, if they're DIing up to side neutral strong and you want to try to mix it up, you can throw a down strong in there because they'll be DIing up for that, so they'll get sent up to the top blast zone a little bit, a little bit better. Something along those lines. At ledge, you can also combo a strong dash into a down strong to spike them down and kill them off the bottom. Light dash doesn't really work all that well with the offstage down strong. For some reason, it's just like an angle thing. It doesn't send them really at the right angle. So if you're going for the spike off the bottom, definitely recommend strong dash to down strong at ledge. And you might have already guessed, but yes, you can also do all of these options out of a wave slime as well. Specifically, the option to wave slime into the down strong at ledge for the spike kill is a particularly good one. But of course, you can always end a wave slime with the neutral strong as well. I won't go too in depth in this part because we already talked about wave sliming in the bread and butter percent builder section. But yes, you can also use the wave slime to combo into your kill options. One of the more flashy kind of options you can do is a strong dash into a short hop into a fast fall snare. Now on stage, this isn't going to work as consistently. You're going to rely on your opponent either having bad DI or missing their DI in some way, shape, or form, and you being able to read that. But off stage, this is particularly powerful because the strong dash is going to pop your opponent up, but then knock them off the stage, kind of at an angle where your fast fall snare is going to cover a lot. This can actually gimp at lower percents if your opponent jumps into your fast fall snare. It's going to eat their jump and put them in a really, really tough position to try to recover even if they don't die off the side. So you're going to want a strong dash, do a short hop, and then if you're reading that your opponent is jumping a lot, you could just do a snare without the fast fall. But if you're noticing that your opponent is opting to go a little bit lower, you can fast fall the snare in order to simply cover more options at that point. Another good kill off the side option at ledge is if you get a grab, you can usually get this grab off of something like a strong dash. You can do a jump. Usually you're going to want to short hop this into a forward throw into a nair. Now, instead of doing the fast fall snare like you did off the strong dash, doing the throw is going to let you read your opponent's jump. This is really good for jump reads, and the light nair is going to be quicker. But if your opponent's at a high enough percent, this might actually be a better play because they're going to die anyway because nair has a fair bit of knockback, and it's also going to come out quicker than your snare is going to. So a good option for higher percents, or if also you notice that your opponent's able to jump out of your strong dash into snare, this jump forward throw is going to be a pretty good read on that kind of opponent. So this option's a little bit trickier. It involves T-dropping, which is taunt dropping. Basically, you grab your opponent, you press taunt while you're in the air, which is going to put you into a tumble. It's also going to release your opponent. And you can get either a strong up air or a strong nair off of this. This is going to rely on a little bit of a read because it's not 100%. It's not a true combo. And if your opponent can mix up their DI or jump out, it's going to be a little bit difficult to hit. But it's a good option to mix up and keep your opponent on their toes, specifically if it's somebody who you're noticing is not DIing things properly. Then being able to hit them with the taunt drop is going to mix them up and kind of put them in a weird spot. Because they may be expecting you to do like a forward throw into a nair or a forward throw into a snare, something like that. So mixing in a T-drop every now and then with your strong up air, which is, I think, Reptar's strongest strong move. I'm not positive on that, but it definitely feels like it. Or a snare to cover more of the options with a longer hitbox. So one of the things you can do to kind of meta mind game your opponent a little bit is you can drift with your charging neutral B. And you're going to see on screen, I'm able to charge a neutral B and then kind of drift backwards or drift forwards while I'm in the air with it. And I think it's just a thing of people maybe misspacing it every now and then. Or if you're really good at mind gaming, what you can do is a couple times during the match, you can hold your neutral B a little bit, but then let it go for the regular projectile and kind of condition your opponent to think, okay, he's just meta mind gaming. He's just going to charge it a little bit, let go of it, use a regular projectile, and then hit me with like a nair or something. And then when they, are conditioned a little bit to kind of believe in that situation, you can then go for the fully charged neutral B and then drift to kind of position yourself. And I think a lot of people get mixed up by the drifting and they misspace it, or they think, okay, I'm going to shield this neutral B and punish. I'm going to try to get into his range, or I'm going to stand right outside of the range of the neutral B and get in his punish range. And then you do a drift and you're mixing up your position and they'll get hit by it. So obviously, it's not something you want to continually throw out there because it can be punishable, but it's something that is actually one of the funnier ways to get a kill, and it works more often than you might think, but definitely use this with caution. I'm not going to go too in-depth with strong dare on stage because generally speaking, it's really not a good option, but I did want to bring it up because specifically on stages with high platforms, such as the top platform on Urkin Armada Invasion, or one of the higher platforms on Tremorton Joyride, something that puts your opponent close to that top blast zone, you can sometimes catch people out with it, and on lighter characters you will get a kill. So I did want to just briefly mention it, but just be very careful because the move is super duper punishable. So overall, Reptar is definitely not a character that has problems killing. A lot of his moves are kill moves, really. There's a lot that I didn't even mention, like you can get a kill with his light dare. He can kind of double dare, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the Edgeguard section of this video. His light up air can kill. You can probably get kills off of his tilts at high enough percent. But I did want to mention some of his more consistent or you know, consistent setups or something that I find personally from playing Reptar that I'm using more often to get kills, instead of just being like, well, just hit him with a move, forehead. So yeah, definitely keep these in your back pocket. Obviously, there's not the only ways to kill with Reptar, but just some of the ways that you can keep in mind when you're playing him, because you definitely want to be able to close out your stocks, because he can pump out the damage, but you know, if you're not killing your opponent, ultimately it doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? So keep these in the back pocket, and let's continue on talking about some of the other parts of Reptar's gameplay. Alright, so in this section of the video, we're going to be going over Reptar's Edgeguard / ledge play options. Now, in my opinion, Reptar doesn't have as many options in this category as other characters, but the options that he has are generally particularly strong ones. So you might not have as many number of options, but the ones you have are going to be pretty effective. So let's not waste any time and let's get right into it. So one of the best and also easiest ways to edgeguard with Reptar is his down strong at ledge. When you look at the hitbox, it covers a good bit of the space off of the ledge as well. So if your opponent is trying to drift onto the ledge with like a PTM recovery or an April recovery, the down strong from Reptar is going to cover a lot of that space. And it's a really, really powerful spike. So it's a really hard knowledge check on your opponent. And if they're not snapping ledge, you're going to be able to just obliterate them. The timing does get a little bit of getting used to in terms of, like, you know, being able to hit those missed recoveries. But once you get the timing down, your opponent's either going to snap ledge or they're going to die with this move. It's always a good idea to position yourself to threaten with this move. So hang out by the ledge and kind of threaten the option and make your opponent uncomfortable. That way, either they're going to snap the ledge or maybe they get a little bit uncomfortable and they try to go for maybe not as good option that you can exploit. You know, just being in a position to threaten with this move puts a lot of your opponents in a bad spot. So definitely a big knowledge check in the Reptar matchup. This one isn't so much of a kill option, but down special at ledge is a pretty powerful option for both edge guarding and ledge trapping. So because you can charge this up and really make this a very big hitbox that covers a lot of space off ledge, even if your opponent is trying to drift onto ledge or something like that, you can really catch them out. And if they miss the ledge snap, not only are they going to eat 30%, but they're going to be popped up in a way that you can then follow up on. And this also works similarly with ledge trapping. Down B covers a lot of options at ledge. The armor can help you cover the get up attack option. The extended hitbox on your charged version can help you cover roll-ons if you time it correctly. Now, if you try to release it right as they're rolling on, they probably will have invincibility and be able to roll through it. But if you release it a little bit later or earlier, then you'll probably cover the roll-on. This can also cover the jump option if they jump into the down B. Down special at ledge, like I said, you're not going to get a kill off of it, but it's a good way to rack up percent, threaten the ledge, and just kind of keep your opponent honest with their options. Reptar's light dare can be used as both an edge guard and kind of a ledge trap at the same time. So obviously, as an edge guard, if you're catching your opponent's jumps and you hit them with your light dare, this move is pretty strong with a lot of knockback. So you can pretty much send your opponent straight down into the blast zone if they're at high enough percent. Even if they're able to get a jump out of it and jump out of hit stun, you're going to put them in a very bad position underneath the stage with this move. Reptar can also double dare, although you're going to really want a hard spam jump and air dash after that because his light dare does have a bit of end lag, so it's pretty committal, and if you miss it, being under the stage with Reptar is not really an ideal position. But you can use his dare to edge guard, as well as ledge trap. If you notice that your opponent is doing the jump off ledge option a lot, if you catch their jump with a light dare, you're able to set them up into yet another edge guard position. You know, you spike them down underneath the stage with the light dare on their jump call out, and you know, you pick an option from there. So definitely keep this light dare option as an option when you're trying to edge guard your opponent or ledge trap them. But again, keep in mind that if you're going for it with the edge guard, it's kind of committal, and as a ledge trap, you're probably not going to kill them with the light dare, but you're able to set them up into a position to be killed by one of your other stronger options. Reptar's Upstrong is actually a pretty good ledge trap. It's a big hitbox that covers all around him, and it's pretty good for covering different options. It covers things like get up attack, it covers things like roll on if you position yourself correctly and time it correctly. It can cover ledge jump if your opponent wants to try to land on you with an aerial. It can cover get up attack or trade with get up attack if you time it correctly. And since it's a pretty powerful move, if your opponent's at a high enough percent, you'll just kill him right off the top with this move. It's a bit tricky to position yourself to cover all these different options, but if you notice that your opponent is going for one particular option and you want to try to get a kill off of it, upstrong's not the worst idea. It's a little bit laggy, so it can be punishable if you mistime it, but it does have a big range and can cover a lot of different things if you want to get a stronger option out for a kill as opposed to something like your down special. So Strong Dare can be a really funny way to get a kill at ledge. Particularly if you notice that your opponent is a panic jumper. So if you're knocking your opponent off stage and they're panic jumping and air dashing directionally back towards the stage, and you're able to read that, Strong Dare can be a pretty good call out for that sort of thing. It can also be a decent edge guard for characters who have to charge up their up special underneath the ledge. So somebody like a Helga or a Korra, you might be able to just simply trade with them or, you know, kill them outright with this move. So it's kind of a niche option. It has a decent hitbox that can cover the ledge, but obviously if you miss, you're SDing. So if they get to ledge faster than you and they get the invincibility, or you just straight up miss, you die. So keep it in mind, but be very cautious with this option. So overall, I would say Reptar's edge guarding / ledge play is okay. It's not the best in the game. It's not the worst in the game. There are other options you can do that I didn't mention, something like a dash back, neutral strong towards your opponent if they're using like ledge get up or ledge roll on and stuff like that. But the ones I mentioned are the ones that I find that I'm using the most or have some like utility. So, you know, something like a mix up option like with the fully charged neutral B. So definitely keep all of these in mind. Don't be afraid to go off stage with Reptar for these edge guards. But just do bear in mind that Reptar's disadvantage state, which we'll cover, is exploitable and his recovery is not the best. So you definitely want to get proficient at being able to take these stocks and finish off your opponent with these options or other options. So don't be afraid to go for him, but just be aware that, you know, maybe going deep for an edge guard with Reptar isn't always the best play. His ledge trapping, I think, is a little bit more of a safe bet and can sometimes be the better option with a character like Reptar who's kind of get bullied off stage at times. Specifically with his down strong at ledge, that's one of the options that I use the most, just as like a knowledge check. Hey, if you don't snap ledge, you're going to die kind of thing. So yeah, you know, don't be afraid to use these options and don't be afraid to go for the edge guards with Reptar. But keep in mind that it's not the best, and he might get himself into a bad position if you know, miss something. So yeah, but those are Reptar's edge guards and ledge trap options. So let's continue on with the rest of the guide. So in this part of the guide, we're going to be talking about Reptar's disadvantage state and recovering with Reptar. Now, I'm going to be just honest about this. Reptar's disadvantage state is pretty brutal. He has some tools that allow him to get out of disadvantage. His light dare isn't the worst thing for getting out of aerial juggles, but the number one tool for getting out of disadvantage with Reptar is going to be his aerial down B, which is going to allow you to armor through a lot of different combos and throw out a hitbox in order to kind of try to get your opponent off you for a little bit and knock them back and try to reset neutral. The big issue is that Reptar is a big body, and against combo-based characters, you're going to find it pretty difficult to get out of a lot of these combos. You know, characters like SpongeBob or Lincoln Loud, even some other characters who aren't necessarily combo-based but have powerful combo tools like Garfield or Zim. You know, just being as big as Reptar is, being as slow as Reptar is, and not really having a lot of moves that allow him to get out of disadvantage it can be pretty brutal sometimes. I mean, there's just going to be times where, quite honestly, you're just going to get comboed and there's really not much you can do about it. People are going to just be able to almost drag you from one side of the stage to the other, and there's not a whole lot you can do out of it. Specifically when it comes to getting out of disadvantage, the one thing you want to try to do with Reptar is get out of disadvantage as early as possible. So what this means is, once a combo starts to get going, if you're not able to just DI out of it or jump out of it, you're going to want to try to armor through it with your down special as soon as you possibly can. If you let the combo string go for too long, you're going to be suffering too much hit stun because you're going to be building up the percent at that point, and you're just not going to be able to even start the armor, or by the time you're able to even get a down B, they'll be able to hit you before the armor frames start, and you're just going to have a really bad time. So when it comes to disadvantage state with Reptar, try to get out as quickly as possible. Obviously, every character wants to get out of disadvantage as quick as possible, but with Reptar it's very, very important. If you're getting aerial juggled, sometimes your light down air can be a nice counter for that, since it's a decently sized hitbox, but your down special in the air is going to be your number one tool for getting at disadvantage. You don't want to become predictable. You don't want to just be constantly using your down special at the same time, all the time, in the same way. But being that you can armor through things, being that you can drift with it, being that it also then throws out a hitbox to knock your opponent away, it's definitely Reptar's best option for escaping combos early before they get to the point where you just can't escape. But if you're playing Reptar, you just have to accept the fact that sometimes you're going to get put in a cutscene, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Now, when it comes to recovery, Reptar's up B is not the greatest. It has hitbox on the way up and on the way down, but if your opponent is able to time it, it's pretty exploitable, since there's not a lot of control over as far as like how far left or right it goes, or as far as the height of it is concerned. It's not the most maneuverable recovery in the game, I'll say that much. Some tips that you can do, as you're recovering, you can throw out your down B if you want to drift a little bit and armor through things. Like if your opponent's setting up for an Edgeguard or a Ledgetrap and you're able to armor through it, a lot of the times you can then recover for free if you're able to hit them away or kind of reversal on them and put them into the Edgeguard situation. You can sometimes throw out like a Nair if you want to try to throw out a hitbox or something, but you definitely have to be aware of the fact that you don't have as many recovery options with Reptar as other characters do. Definitely the number one way to recover with Reptar, I think, is just going to be snapping ledge. I think going high with Reptar most of the time is not a great play, since he is such a big body. Going high is more often than not just going to lead to you being edge guarded in some way, shape, or form. So I definitely think going low is the best option with Reptar. So you're going to want to practice snapping ledge with his up B on every stage, just so that you're constantly snapping ledge. You're not getting hit out of things that, you're not getting hit out of your recovery. That's going to lead to you being in an even worse position, without a jump or something like that. You can get put in some pretty bad positions with Reptar. So overall, Reptar's disadvantage state is definitely a weakness of his character. Being big, being heavy, being slow, being one of the characters that falls pretty quickly. You're going to get comboed. You're going to get a lot of percent built up on you. Don't get frustrated. Just practice armoring through things, practice snapping ledge with your up B, and making the most of the time when you're on the stage. That's definitely the number one thing. You don't want to be being put in these situations as much as possible. As Reptar, you're going to want to be on the stage as much as possible to make use of your stronger attacks that you can throw out, as opposed to trying to recover against some characters. It gets pretty brutal. So overall, yeah, his recovery definitely a bit rough, to say the least. So this section of the video I'm going to be calling the Reptar meta. And in this section I'm just going to be going over different things about Reptar and about his gameplay that we need to kind of highlight just to make sure that we're getting the most out of this character. So in terms of stages, there's not any particular list out there that talks about, Reptar's best or worst stages, but I think the general consensus is that Jellyfish Fields is Reptar's best stage. And this makes sense from one particular perspective when you think about if we're able to push our opponents towards the ledge as much as possible using our down special tech chase, that's going to be as good of an advantage for us as we possibly can. Because once our opponents are in the corner of the stage, it's harder for them to tech out. Because if they tech out, it's an easier read for us because, well, they can't tech out towards ledge because they can only go so far, and then they're going to hit with another down special. And if they tech in, we already know that we're going to cover that with a down special. So Jellyfish Fields being Reptar's best stage makes sense. I think shorter stages in general are also pretty much more of an advantageous thing for Reptar than longer stages are. Just because if we're able to box our opponent into a corner and rack up the damage easier, it's just going to make our lives way better for us as Reptar. So shorter stages in general, as far as horizontal width is considered, are generally better for Reptar. Also stages that avoid maybe too big of a platform, something like on Rooftop Rumble, because characters that are faster than us can kind of circle camp us. For example, if we're up against like a Dandy Phantom or a Toph on Rooftop Rumble, that's going to be a pretty hard thing for us to try to get in on, because we're going to struggle to get in on projectiles or characters that can just outmaneuver us. And if we give them a big platform, it's just going to be kind of a rough time in general. So you want to avoid stages that give your opponent too much of an advantage in terms of being able to avoid our advantage state and kind of circle camp us as a slower character. As far as our character matchups are concerned, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, any character that has a very strong combo game is going to be a really tough situation for us just because we're a bigger body as Reptar, we're slower, we fall faster, so we're going to be falling into a lot of combos. So characters like Lincoln Loud or SpongeBob, for example, even characters that aren't necessarily combo characters but have strong combo tools, something like a Garfield or a Patrick, it can be kind of difficult for a Reptar to deal with just because we're going to be dealing with a lot of the nonsense that those characters have to throw out at us, and we're going to be getting hit by a lot of it. So it can be pretty rough overall. As far as characters that Reptar does well into, characters that he can kill kind of early. So some of the lighter characters in the game that you might be able to just cheese a stock off of with a snare or something along those lines, you're going to do pretty well against. And characters that maybe don't have the best tools to get out of disadvantage. And that's one thing that we need to do as Reptar, is push our advantage state as much as possible. So characters that don't have great disadvantage tools are going to be really, really good for us. It's super important for us to push our advantage state as Reptar as hard as possible. When you get your opponent into a bad situation with something like the down special tech chase, we need to be able to push that for as much percent and as much damage as possible and as many stocks as we possibly can get. Because we're going to be put in such a bad spot when we are in our disadvantage state, we need to force the issue and really clean up stocks when we get the chance with our advantage state. So you're definitely going to want to practice your down special tech chasing, you're going to want to practice your kill options, and you're going to want to practice mixing them up in order to hit your opponent so you're not too predictable and you're going to be able to take those stocks. We need to be able to take stocks because coming from behind as Reptar can be kind of difficult sometimes, especially when you're playing certain characters and you're pretty much going to be starting each stock at around 50 to 60% if you're getting caught in a combo early. We need to be able to play from ahead, and we need to be able to clean up stocks when we can. It's not impossible to play from behind as Reptar. If you catch your opponent out with a couple of missed techs and some down special tech chases into a couple of high percent stock kills, or you're able to cheese them with something like a light dare stock kill, you can come from behind. It's just not ideal. So as far as the Reptar meta is concerned, shorter stages, particularly Jellyfish, are really good for us. Characters that have bad disadvantage states are going to be good matchups for Reptar. Some characters are some people consider them almost borderline unplayable. Some characters like, SpongeBob or Lincoln Loud or Oblina or Nigel Thornberry can be really, really rough. So keep that in mind. And push your advantage state. Push, and clean up your stocks as much as possible. Alright, so in this next section, I'm going to be going over some top player tips from Captain Planet with Metal Arms, who is one of, if not the best Reptar mains in the game currently. He submitted a list of tips to me, so I'm just going to be going over the different things that he told me, and I'll kind of be going a little bit into detail about what he meant, That way you can get some advice from a top player. So without further ado, let's get into the tips provided by Captain Planet with Metal Arms. Alright, so in this section, I'm just going to be going over the different top player tips that Captain Planet with Metal Arms provided me. So I'm just going to go down the list based on what he wrote, and we'll see what he has to say. So the first thing he has to say is down special landed perfectly on a shield is a free grab from air. And so what he's talking about is your aerial down special. If you land it perfectly on shield, you can almost always get a grab out of it. This applies to gray shield. This does not apply to yellow shield. And it does take some spacing and timing, but obviously getting a grab is really good for Reptar because you can down throw them and set them up into your down special tech chase, which is something that he also mentioned. You want to focus on down throws unless you have confirms or options to kill. So he mentioned that some heavier characters you can also go for forward throws, but down throws for the most part are going to be your best friend because it's going to set you up into a grounded state if they miss that tech for your down special tech chase. He mentioned that laser, or your fully charged neutral B, should be used consistently at high ranges and on characters trying to land without resources. He also mentioned that you want to release the laser at different times because you can release laser as soon as the blue flash happens, so use the extra time for delays and tricks. And I think this is a really good tip. You know, I did mention that fully charged neutral B is one of my favorite moves to throw in as a mix-up option, and especially if you know where your opponent is going to be landing without resources, as he pointed out, that's actually really big. You can, you can space it and you can time it and you can usually get a kill off of it just because it's so strong. So if you've managed to waste your opponent's landing resources, you know, their up B, their air dash, their jumps, and you know that they have to land at a specific point, yeah, definitely want to mix in laser and then change up the timing with the laser as well. He said that light dare kills really strong at early percent, and even more importantly, has jump, forward throw, dash attack, and regular forward throw, dash attack near ledge, which you can then use to jump and down air them when they're near the bottom blast zone. And yeah, light dare is really, really strong. It actually catches a lot of people off guard just because of how strong it really is. So it's definitely a move you're going to want to make use out of, specifically given those combos that he just mentioned, and just as a general edge guard tool. Another tip is a really good way to utilize Reptar's movement and drift is focus on the range that your Nair actually provides you. And this is good for spacing, this is good for trying to get out of edgeguard situations and drift with his Nair to throw out that hitbox. It's another way for you to land, and it's a way for you to land going high. I did mention in his recovery aspect that going low is generally the play, but if you want to land high, you can use his Nair to drift a little bit and cover some space. And he also mentions that you want to use your projectile when recovering from off stage because it can just be one extra thing that they have to worry about when trying to get back. And even if they grab it or shield it, you know, it makes a big difference throwing out a hitbox like that. So Nair and projectile off stage as a recovery tool is definitely something you want to keep in mind. He said don't be afraid to go off stage, which again, something that I mentioned in his Edgeguard section. Don't be afraid to go off stage with Reptar. Be aware of the fact that you can get put into some bad situations if you get reversaled, but don't be afraid. You don't want to be giving up ledge for free. It's definitely something that you want to threaten the Edgeguard on your opponent, because even if you're just mind gaming them and threatening Edgeguards every now and then, you might have them do a panic up B early, miss a ledge, and then you can downstrong them if you don't go for the ledge guard or edge guard. So definitely a good tip from Cap there. Don't be afraid to go off stage. Always be threatening. He said down special is a great way to cover your returning hitboxes to stage, and that's a really, really good point. Against characters who have really good hitboxes that they can throw off stage, or use something like a Helga or a Garfield with his pies, down special just arming through and eating those projectiles is going to be huge for you. So time it. You don't just want to throw out down special all the time, because if they're able to time their projectile to your down special, then you're going to get hit. You're going to be put in a bad situation. But if you're able to armor through some of their projectiles to get back to ledge for the invincibility, or just generally back to stage, that's going to be huge. And then for some character specific things, he mentioned that characters like Helga and Korra's recovery are pretty weak to Reptar. Helga can snap easier than Korra, making her have some ability to escape down special with good timing, but Korra physically can't, so he says that you win basically the moment that she's off stage. You win against Korra. So some good character-specific tips from Cap there. Talking about taking advantage of characters' bad recoveries or characters whose recoveries are specifically linear or have a hard time snapping stage. So overall, these are some really good tips from Cap. Definitely things you want to keep in mind. Definitely some things that weren't mentioned in the video earlier. So some things that I had even, forgotten to mention. So really good advice here from Cap. And overall, just want to say thank you to him for his help on this guide. And thank you to the other Reptars in the Discord and other areas that I reached out to for their help on this guide as well. Alright, so at this point, the guide is pretty much done. The last section here you're going to be seeing is a clip compilation featuring some of the more stylish things you can do with Reptar, along with some of the more practical things, practical kill setups that you'll be getting more often. So, being that this is the last you're going to hear from me, I just want to say thank you for watching. I want to personally thank everyone who helped me with this guide, other Reptar players in the Discord, and anyone else that gave me some tips or advice as far as covering things on Reptar. I want to specifically thank Captain Planet with Metal Arms for his input and his section on top player tips. And in general, I just want to thank you guys for watching. I just want to say that I hope I did Reptar justice. If you guys are thinking about picking up playing Reptar in any capacity, whether that be a main, secondary, pocket, or just for fun character, I highly recommend Reptar as a character in this game. He's so much fun to play. I have an absolute blast every time I play him. Honestly, one of the most fun characters to play in the entire game, in my opinion. And once you really know what to do with Reptar, you can get pretty fancy. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank everyone who helped me with this video, and hopefully it helps some of you guys out. Leave anything, any topics or any questions about Reptar in the comments section or anything like that in general down there, and I will do my best to respond. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this helped, and enjoy the ending clip comp.